Hey everybody. So I made a video on Tuesday where I strongly criticized Donald Trump's words at Charlie Kirk's memorial service. And I went pretty hard in the paint against the service itself too. I was really appalled by the entire thing. And I promised that I would make a few more videos explaining why I objected so strongly to that event. So since Tuesday when I made the video, I have gotten some really good pushback on that video. And quite a few people saw something very different in that service than what I saw. And they thought I was unfair in my critiques of it. So I'm going to talk about that service in several videos because it's super important stuff, and I think it's actually a great example of so many of the themes that I've been trying to talk about around Christian nationalism. So many of those themes just came out in full display, and the fact that people have trouble seeing that is exactly why I do what I'm doing. I'm trying to help people to see that. So since I'm going to be spending several videos going deep into what really bothered me about that service, I just want first to talk about Charlie Kirk himself, because I think that's going to help people to make sense of everything else that I say and to sort of know that, I think you need to know where I'm currently at emotionally, because it plays into all of this. I was really shaken by Kirk's murder personally, and it came on the heels of the murders this summer in my own city of Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the shootings of another couple that night by the same guy, a guy who apparently has ties to this whacked religious movement that I've been personally speaking against on this channel. So like a lot of other people, especially people who are like me, who are trying to reason with people in public, I'm still dealing with some personal trauma from these violent incidents that have been happening. So that's the emotional context for what I'm going to share today. But my main message today is really important to understand, if you want to understand everything else that I'm going to be saying in later videos about that memorial service, and not so much the service, the message that was on display in that service. So my main message today is that I used to be very much like Charlie Kirk in a very important way, in one very important respect. I was very much like him in the way that he blended his Christian faith with American nationalism. And I find that to be an offense before God. But I used to believe that stuff. So when I remember that I used to believe that stuff, it helps me understand my friends who watched what I considered an abomination of a service, and they didn't recognize that it was an abomination, because I've been in their shoes years ago. And I hate to admit this, but recently I've been remembering some things that I have tried to forget. I've been revisiting my own past while I've been processing what bothered me so much about that memorial service. I've often told the story of how I was raised in a conservative Republican home, and Ronald Reagan was the first president that I voted for, and how I was involved in the pro-life movement for years before I went into ministry. And I've even described myself back then as a soft Christian nationalist at the time. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know that that's what I was, but now looking back, that's how I would describe it. And so this memory came back to me the past couple days, and like I said, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but if I want people to listen to me, I think I have to be honest about where I've come from. So in 1992, Pat Buchanan gave a famous speech at the Republican National Convention, and people have called it the Culture War speech. And you can go read it or watch it, and I don't even want to read it anymore because I still remember enough of it. I remember enough of the things he said. And I remember loving it at the time. I mean, it felt a little racist to me, even at that time. And so I didn't like that, but clearly I downplayed it. And I loved the militancy of what he was saying. I was stirred by his rhetoric. Like I felt like I was being personally called to arms to save America for God, for the good people. And I thought, personally, he seems like a terrible guy. And I think I would despise this guy personally. but he's got the right idea. And that's what I thought, So if you're somebody who feels that way about Donald Trump, for instance, or if you're somebody who watched that Charlie Kirk memorial and you weren't appalled by it, or maybe you were even stirred by the rhetoric, I just hope that you listen to the next few videos that I'm making, because that was me 30 years ago. And that's definitely not me now. And I'm just going to say this, I'm not only like 10 times happier than I was back then, but I feel like I understand the way of Jesus a lot better than I did back then. So I'm going to say some really harsh things about that service in the next few videos, about the message behind it. And I'm going to talk about a few of the people who spoke at that service, and I'm not going to be flattering, but I want you to know I resonated with that stuff as a younger guy. And honestly, I think I know the only thing that's different about me from anyone else who hasn't left that movement. It's not that I'm smarter. It's not that I'm holier. It's definitely not that I have a more finely tuned moral sense. It's none of that. In the end, I think it's simply this, and I've mentioned it before. During the first couple of years of my pastoral ministry, I found myself subtly judging people in my congregation because of their political beliefs. And I thought, well, that's not good. So I made a practical decision as a pastor to cut myself off from the news. And it's not that I thought I was wrong in my beliefs or that I was being deceived, but I remember a friend talking to me about it and just gently telling me, he said something like, you seem pretty angry about the world. And he told me, I have a friend who used to read all the same things you do, Pat, and he listened to the same things that you listen to, and he was always angry too. And he stopped listening to all that stuff, and now he's not so angry anymore. And when my friend told me that, I thought, well, I couldn't really argue with him. The things I was listening to were making me really angry. And I thought, I don't want to be an angry pastor. So I stepped out of the echo chamber. I completely shut off the noise. And honestly, I think that that's the only difference I can find between myself and my loved ones who still believe that stuff. I shut off the constant drumbeat, not because I disagreed with it, but because I just wanted to be a better pastor, and it wasn't helping me to be a good pastor. And it's hilarious now when people accuse me of being swayed by the mainstream media or whatever, because I didn't listen to any of it. I just did pastor stuff for many years. So when I retired from ministry in 2016, I started paying attention again, and I started by watching Fox News. And pretty quickly, I felt like they were showing me the world through a funhouse mirror. They were trying to give me Donald Trump, too. And I just thought, this is insane. This is obviously insane. But most of my Christian friends were going along with it. And again, the only difference between me and them is that I had stepped out of the echo chamber for years. So when I stepped back in, I saw how distorted their view of the world had become, and maybe it had always been that distorted. And so that's how I'm here now. But I can't let myself forget where I came from. And that brings me back to Charlie Kirk. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that we were the same kind of person. That would be dishonest. I mean, I criticized his awful tweet a few months ago when he wrote that we have to immediately cut off all immigration, including legal immigration, from all third world countries. And when I was at the deepest levels of my old worldview, I know I did underestimate the amount of racism that drove that movement. But I would have never said or even thought that sort of thing about trying to limit the number of brown people coming into the country. But again, his basic belief in melding together God and country, I shared that. And that belief left me open to the vile rhetoric of a guy like Pat Buchanan. So just in the interest of honesty, I do have to say I did strongly disagree with Charlie Kirk, and he often made me angry. And since I said that in the past, I'm not going to deny that. I didn't like his tactics. I opposed his entire movement, and I thought that he said things that were flagrantly racist or sexist. And I know people are going to say that he didn't always do that, or that when he said those things, he was doing it for effect. But I'll say the same thing about him that I've said many times about Donald Trump. I can't get inside either of their hearts, but I have no idea if they have bigotry in their hearts. People have even said that Donald Trump isn't personally as bigoted in real life as he seems. He just plays a bigot on TV. And that might be true because bigotry is a heart thing. Racism, though, racism is what we do. It's what we say out loud to put people down for whatever reason. It's the choices that we make as a society, the way that those choices impact the way our country is shaped. So if I publicly advocate for unequal treatment of others based on race, that's a racist act, regardless of why I might be doing it. If I publicly mock people because of their race, it doesn't matter if I'm doing it out of personal bigotry or I'm doing it to win votes or to get donations or to get clicks or just to win an argument. If I say some of the things that both Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump have said publicly, to that extent, I'll be saying racist things. And it's the same with sexism and stuff. So on that level, Charlie Kirk simply did say racist and sexist things. And it doesn't matter why he said those things. He was wrong to do it, and it was wrong for people to support him for doing it. And I was wrong to support Pat Buchanan 30 years ago when he did that stuff. And I regret it, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't see just how wrong it was at the time. And one more, I think, deep and important disagreement I have with Charlie Kirk. I just have no idea how he could reconcile his constant appeals to truth with his support for Donald Trump, who is the most false politician in my lifetime. I don't understand how Kirk could claim to speak for truth when he spearheaded a movement whose entire currency is lies, in service to an administration whose entire foundation is lies. And no matter how far down you go with the Trump administration, it's lies all the way down. And yet Charlie Kirk is now held up as a champion for truth. And I have no interest in tearing down his memory, but I do wish that people weren't already building him up into an idol. He was a human being. He's one whose faith, I think, was affected by the same nationalistic contaminants that mine was for many years. And to some extent, mine still is. I mean, that's one of the birthrights of American Christians. We all feed at the trough, at least a little bit, of that God and country slop. But it's wrong, and it is a contaminant. And Charlie Kirk's movement is gorging themselves on it. And that memorial service the other night was a bacchanalia of that stuff. So I'm going to continue to try to explain what I mean by all that. But about Charlie himself, I just want to say this. On one level, his life and his movement, I think, are a cautionary tale. It's not a good idea to elevate someone that young to such a prominent position. It's not fair to them. He was obviously a smart guy, and he clearly had some form of Christian faith. And even as a high schooler, people say that he had these strong conservative opinions and that he pushed them out there really hard, and he could be combative and like a verbal flamethrower. So when I look at all this from a pastoral perspective, I would have wanted to help that young guy develop his gifts. I'd want to help him broaden his perspective, to widen the lens for several years, not to just sharpen his attacks at such a young age, but some wealthy and powerful people looked at him and they saw talent and they saw a political racehorse and they wanted him in their stable. So they helped him start an organization and they gave him a bunch of money and they helped him build a platform that ended up weaponizing his sharpest edges instead of helping him to round himself out. And I think that was unfair to him as a human being, even if he didn't feel that it was unfair at the time. He died at 31 years old. I was 26 years old when I heard that Pat Buchanan speech, and I resonated with it. I was speaking on behalf of the pro-life movement back then, and I wanted to get involved in exactly the sort of movement Charlie Kirk founded. There was one that I heard about, and I even went to a couple meetings at a church with some people who wanted to go a lot further, it turned out, than I was going in my pro-life work. And they had a list of every kind of sinful person in the nation and a plan for rooting those people out. And I remember the first meeting, they showed this ridiculous video about the gay agenda at one of the meetings. And then I remember the second meeting, it was this long meeting about how they wanted to infiltrate an adult bookstore in the neighborhood and get proof that was going to allow them to bring the owner up on obscenity charges. And I thought, man, here I am. I'm sitting here. I'm a guy in my mid-20s. And these people are thinking an awful lot more about sex than I am. And one of my saving graces back then, I guess, is that even at my most Christian nationalist stage, I still had as many Bob Dylan lyrics in my head as I did Bible verses. So I looked at them and I thought, old lady judges watch people in pairs, limited in sex. They dare to push fake morals, insult and stare. While money doesn't talk, it swears. Obscenity, who really cares? Propaganda, all is phony. If my thought dreams could be seen, they'd probably put my head in a guillotine. He pronounced it guillotine. So I knew I had no interest in spending any more time with those people. So maybe it wasn't just turning off the echo chamber that saved me from Christian nationalism. I guess maybe my early catechism into Bob Dylan planted this subversive seed in me, one that's only now come full bloom in recent years. So I'm grateful for that too, I guess. But here's the core of the issue. Whatever you might think about the book of Revelation, and I'm not somebody who's always looking for the Antichrist, and I wasn't expecting the rapture the other day, but whatever you think of it, I get one message loud and clear from Revelation. Empire is the beast. Worldly empire is the beast, and Christians are never supposed to get behind empire. The words of Jesus, the gospel of the kingdom, subverts worldly empire. And when Christians get that wrong and we twist the subversive words of Jesus to prop up empire, it never ends well for anyone. And when we use a caricature of Jesus as a mascot for empire, we've turned the gospel completely on its head. And whether we mean to or not, at that point, we're serving the beast instead of Jesus. And that's what I saw in that memorial service. So I'm going to take you through it piece by piece over the next few videos to explain what I mean. But as for Charlie Kirk himself, I saw a young guy who had some gifts and talents and some strong opinions, and he had some obvious character flaws like we all do. And I think he ought to have been shepherded better. But he was only 31 when he died. I was just beginning seminary when I was 31. And I was still at that time several years away from making that choice to step out of the echo chamber. So when that guy shot Charlie Kirk, he robbed him of the opportunity to live the years that I've gotten to live, to experience the things that I've gotten to experience, to see some of his most cherished beliefs crumble into dust the way that I have, to be disillusioned like I have, which I think is one of the best things that any of us can experience. Because if we're never disillusioned, we're going to remain living in our illusions. And we've all got illusions. So I've had the privilege of looking back on my former beliefs and analyzing them at a distance and choosing what I'm going to keep and what I'm going to throw away. And I'm still in that process. And the guy who shot Charlie Kirk stole that from him. And he stole him from his wife and his children, of course. And he stole him from an organization that I do oppose with every fiber of my being. But those people loved him, and they respected him, and they learned from him. And who knows, if he'd been given the opportunity to broaden his outlook in his later years and to cast off the Christian nationalism part that was just kind of mucking up his faith, maybe he would have had a powerful impact on the people who followed him, and we're never going to know because his life was stolen from him, and I would say from all of us. And now those same people who elevated him way too young, I think, for their own purposes are now going to elevate him once more, again, for their own purposes. And they're going to try to harden his memory into something that, if he was anything like me, he would come to regret in later years. So in the coming days, when I talk about his movement and when I speak very harshly about the beliefs behind that movement, I'm in no way believing that this is where Charlie would have ended up. We don't know. If his life hadn't been taken from him, and I make no judgments about his ultimate story. I mean, he's in God's hands. I'm just grateful that I lived long enough myself to see the things myself that I was getting wrong at 31 years old. And I hope to live long enough to see the things that I'm getting wrong right now. So thanks for listening.